Thank you very much. Dr. Erik Verdin is back in Warsaw at the Longevity Center. Thank you very much for coming and for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
How do you enjoy Poland?
Very much so. Actually, I've never been in Poland in such a nice weather, so it's actually beautiful. And
is it? You were always in a... I didn't realize that.
No, I mean, not. This is absolutely perfect. The weather yesterday was beautiful. I was walking through the city, you know, downtown. It was just gorgeous, a glorious day.
Thank you. We are very proud. So what is your main key area of research that you are conducting at the moment at the Bach Institute? And what is the main area that actually you focus on?
So as you know, we have 300 people working on aging. So aging is a very pleiotropic process. So there's not a single cause of aging. And so the Bach Institute, as having many investigators, is involved in many different aspects. So it's very hard for me to say, you know, what is the main area, because we have scientists working on Alzheimer's, we have scientists working on metabolism, we have scientists working on stem cells, we have I work on immunology and immunity. Some are working, there's a lot of effort at the Bach on senescence still, because it was most of the foundation of the field was created by Judy Campisi, who sadly passed away this year. So many of us are still studying the role of senescence in aging. But I think the beauty of the aging field is that we are still trying to understand all of the pieces of aging and trying to make sense of how they fit all together. And I think, you know, one thing that I hope is in the future we will get to a simplification. You know, what is really aging? But there's a lot of progress being made in many different areas. So I think that's really the exciting part.
So what is your definition of aging?
So aging is, there are two aspects to aging. One is the causes of aging, which is damage, essentially. So we live in an environment where we are subjected to damage from gamma rays, from the sky, from gravity pulling on our muscles and our bones, UV irradiation, also from the sun.
So environmental factors.
Oxygen. So all of the causes of aging, we will never be able to change them. Well, maybe we can put sunscreen. That's one really important aspect. So what is aging is our ability or inability to repair all of the damage. And it's because we know that, for example, if you cannot repair your DNA, you will age much more quickly. The same thing if you don't use sunscreen, your skin will age faster. So what the field of aging is dealing with is understanding the repair mechanism and trying to see, can we actually activate them, make them stronger? Or can we live in a way that decreases the damage, for example? You know, and I think this is the whole area of sort of a lifestyle medicine, trying to understand what can you change in your lifestyle to mitigate the damage that your body has to deal with.
For anybody that doesn't know, Bach Institute in California is the leading institute on aging research in the world. And Dr. Erik Verdin has been building up the team. I think when we met about 5 years ago, it was still about 200 or 240. Now you are up to...
We're close to 300. And we aim to double it in the next 10 years.
And also you changed your focus. I think you were more, a few years ago, you were more focusing on more basic research in terms of aging. Now you're going into more practical research.
Yeah, we have not changed the focus. I still think that basic research is the foundation to everything. And so a lot of the work that we were doing until I came 7 years ago was almost exclusively focused on animal models. So studying aging in mouse, in rats, in fruit flies, in the little worm. What we've been doing in the last 7 years is adding another dimension on top of it, which is taking all of the knowledge of aging in animal models and bringing it to humans, and with the goal of trying to improve the way people are aging.
And also you focus a lot on female longevity, which I think the center at your Bach Institute was one of the first in the world that started focusing on why we age quicker than men as women. Also the female reproductive longevity. So how can we increase the potential for women to actually conceive later in life, and how does it impact aging? Where are we with this research today?
So I think it's a reflection of a broader movement. Is you know, the role of women in society is being more and more recognized. You know, as an example, we're having a
it's the right time. It's about 50% of the population.
Exactly. So it's actually crazy when you think about it. But until, you know, not so long ago, 20, 30 years ago, new drugs were not tested in women. Everything was tested in men. Now, the reason that was always argued was that men are more simple, as we know. Women cycle, so, you know, there's big effect of the menstrual cycle in terms of the biology. Women can be premenopausal, postmenopausal. So people just solve the problem very easily, saying, well, we will just study men. So that's the unfortunate situation in which we were, because many issues that are really unique to women were not studied, such as, you know, hormonal replacement therapy, the effect of menopause. And so so we are part of a whole movement. The Bach Institute is not the only organization that's doing this, but there's, including at the NIH, there are requirements now when you do experiments, and even in animals, that you've been studying females and males. And the next step in this is in medicine, you know, really trying to understand what is it about aging in women. And I think there are really interesting aspects that are emerging out of this. One is that women live longer than men. Okay, and that's the good news.
That's a fact.
That's a fact, and it happens everywhere in the world. But women age less well than men. That is, they live longer, but they have more chronic disease of aging. And I think the reason appears to be that at menopause, there's a dramatic transition that happens. Until menopause, women sort of age much better than men. Less heart disease, less complications. After menopause, everything changes. And so we see in women then an increased burden of disease, increased Alzheimer's, increased heart disease, and so on. And so that's one really critical aspect that we are trying to understand. What is it about menopause? You know, does hormonal replacement therapy actually alleviate all of these problems? That's really big questions for women. The other aspect is the ovary is one organ that ages faster than any other organ. So it's almost, we call it the canary in the coal mine. So it's an indicator. And we know, for example, women who have early menopause tend to live shorter than women who have late menopause. So there's, again, a reflection of the fact that when women lose their female hormones, their aging seems to be accelerating. So we need to understand this for a number of reasons. One is to improve the health of women, but also to solve some problems, because some women, you know, enter menopause at age 40 or even earlier. So in those cases, there's loss of fertility. And, you know, we have a society now where women are playing a much bigger role in terms of being part of the workforce. So many women delay childbearing, they wait, and sometimes they wait too late. And so we want really to understand how, you know, what is it? Why is the ovary protecting against aging? And what can we do about this knowledge to improve fertility and allow women to have more fulfilling and healthier lives?
I mean, this is such a huge topic. So what you're saying is we are actually living longer, but we are living longer I mean, our health span is much shorter than men. And also what we observe in the Longevity Center, because we have younger and younger clients coming to us, that girls start actually having their cycle much earlier, so which we don't yet know, but it might reflect that their menopause might actually start also much earlier, which will mean that, I mean, we are heading into a very different society in the future. I mean, yeah, this is definitely one of the most important aspects to focus on. Are you also focusing on the aspects like microbiome, for example, and the connection between microbiome and brain? Is this something that is being studied, or is it something that it's of interest to you personally?
Personally, hugely, because I think, I study the immune system, and you might not know. So the immune system is what we call a distributed organ. So your immune system is in your thymus, it's in the spleen, but it's also everywhere in your body. Your immune cells are everywhere. And it turns out that about half of your immune system is around the gut. And the reason why there's so much immunology around the gut is that this is an area where there are lots of bacteria, your microbiome. And so your immune system is constantly sitting in the environment of what's happening in the gut. And for example, if you have a disruption of the gut barrier because of a poor diet or because of other conditions, your immune system might be exposed to bad products from the bacteria. And we also know that there's a whole literature emerging on the interplay between what the bacteria in your microbiome make and how your immune system functions. And so when I talk to people, colleagues, friends, clients, about what should you do to improve your health, I think one of the number one step for me is to improve gut health. And there are many ways that we can discuss how you can do this. Because I think it really is, it influences not only your immune system, but also your brain. There's lots of evidence that whatever happens in your gut is talking to your brain and allowing you to...
And your mood and
your
how
mood,
you feel.
everything. For example, the highest level of serotonin production, which we all know serotonin as a brain transmitter, the highest producer is actually in your gut.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's really surprising now. And we see that also at the Longevity Center, how medicine has progressed enormously in terms of fixing very specific problems, but there's so many things in between and so many connections that we don't understand. You mentioned the immune system and microbiome, but also how does stress influence all this and how our mindset influences all that. And we really don't know yet exactly which triggers do actually speed up some of those processes. And I think this is the most fascinating area for me in this sector, that there's so many interventions that we don't yet know that might be actually very useful and sometimes very simple. We were discussing yesterday cold showers and red light, and I think there's a lot of simple interventions, but which of the interventions in general that are available today to longevity clinics and also in research that you understand are the most promising?
Where do we start? I mean, I think, when I think about sort of one way to reframe the question would be what should I do or what do you do to actually be as healthy as you can?
Yeah, let's start with this. Yeah. What do you do to your own longevity?
And I think that's the foundation. So we can talk about specific interventions after, but for me, it's nutrition. It's what you eat, when you eat. We've talked about this many times before. Physical activity, sleep, stress mitigation, and last but not least is your human connections, your friends. So
and your passion,
and your whether you're an optimist. So there's all of the psychological aspects, and I think there could be a 2-hour discussion about what do you do for each of these aspects. But I think really about them as bank accounts where you can actually place investment. If you want to become wealthy when you're old, the best way to do this is to diversify. So you actually your portfolio should be diverse. So you should not be. I meet quite often people who say, "Well, I exercise so much, but I don't care about what I eat and this and that." So I tell them, the way to be healthy is first start with your sleep, because it is the command center. If your brain is well rested, you're going to make the right decision in terms of what you do when you exercise. If I don't sleep well for one night, Actually, I have a hard time sticking to my diet. You know, I don't want to exercise and so on. So really think about it as a bank account with many different portfolios that you are investing and trying to do something for each of your investments every day. This is something that should be started as early as possible. You know, the earlier you start, the better off you'll be. Although there's evidence that it's never too late. Even there's many cases
That's a very good point. Yeah.
of people who start at 70, you know, and all of a sudden develop a, you know, exercise routine, start eating better. You know, and people think about this in terms of longevity. That's how I started. I think I want to live long. But what I've come to realize is when you actually do all of this, you feel better every day now, not 10 years from now, because, and that's to me is the greatest
it's more
gift
important, yeah.
of living healthy, is that you will be your best self that you can possibly be. Now, in terms of, you know, new interventions that are available, there are many. As you know, infrared light and cold plunge and sauna and this and that. So there's hundreds of things that you can do right now. Most of them have not been proven. They make you feel good. You know, a good example is cryonics, the whole idea of, you know, being exposed to cold. I don't think there are too many studies that show that it has an effect on your longevity. But having tried it, I can tell you it makes me feel better. Now, there's one that I think is really unique that I try to apply to myself is heat, sauna. There, the evidence is there. You know, there's multiple studies coming out of Finland and other Nordic countries where they've shown the more sauna you do, for example, the less risk you have for heart disease, Alzheimer's, and all this. So I think there's something very protective about, you know, high heat. And I think it can be many different forms. It can be steam baths, sauna, hot tub. All of those are, you know, hot Pilates. You know.
So we can look at gene therapies and CRISPR and so on, but actually there's a lot of other things we can do in the meantime without going into really this extreme therapies yet. Or do you think...
And I think, you know, for CRISPR for aging, it is not going to happen for a long time. That would be my prediction.
To be official and to be...
even to be tested, because frankly, I mean, there's some, you know, it depends how you...
Parabiosis, what do you think about? Some people do that, even in the US?
Yes. And actually, we just did a clinical trials in collaboration with a startup where we did plasmapheresis. And I think we saw some clear evidence even after 3 months of some reversion of aging. But again, it's a really sort of very significant intervention. You know, it involves having big needles in both arms, hours on these machines. So this is not risk-free, it's expensive. So it's not something, you know, it makes no sense for me that someone would be not having the foundation and to go do plasmapheresis hoping to, you know, to live longer. So for me, the philosophy should be do the foundation first. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to invest time and effort. And once your foundation is ready, then hopefully in the future you will benefit from the new novel therapies. Now,
and I think this is super important because you can do, as you said, foundation to really keep you in the best possible shape, but also you can do a lot at home. And if you can achieve the same results or similar results or satisfying results to you, I think it's I think it's good enough.
It's good enough for now, because you know the science is moving very quickly, and I think we all suspect that in the next 10 to 20 years we will have novel therapies. I would predict that they will be much more like drug-like than they will be CRISPR or gene therapy. Because gene therapy is I mean, it depends how you define gene therapy. For example, the COVID vaccine could be called gene therapy, but that's a different form. There's a more drastic form of gene therapy, like some people are doing, that are much more risky. And I remind the whole audience, when we think about gene therapy, the whole field of gene therapy started in 1990, and there was a lot of enthusiasm. They were going to solve and to
cancer and
everything. And then 3 young people died between the age of 20 and 24. and nothing happened for 20 years. And in some way, this is what worries me about in the aging field, that people do not always appreciate the risks of what they're doing. And, you know, the last thing that this field can afford is to kill a 30-year-old person hoping to make them live forever. Yeah. So, the barrier for anti-aging intervention is always going to be higher because we're dealing with people who are healthy, primarily healthy. So, I think the field is moving. If I have to make a prediction, is that in the next 10 to 20 years, we will have novel drugs that target aging, and we might already know what they are, rapamycin and so on. But for gene therapy and CRISPR even more, CRISPR, you're really going right into the DNA. That's a whole other, ball game.
It is, but we don't really understand fully cancer or Alzheimer enough to see whether they are all really connected with just genetic predisposition or maybe other factors that might appear in the process of aging.
Well, aging is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, macular degeneration, all of those diseases, heart attacks, stroke. So aging and the aging pathways that we study is the major risk factor. And so by understanding aging and slowing down aging, either through lifestyle intervention or through drugs, we will suppress all of these diseases together. That's the prediction.
But also you mentioned this, some of those interventions that are more lifestyle or that are used also in clinics are not really tested for longevity per se, but some of them are really tested in the context of different hallmarks of aging. And I think this is already a good starting point because we also see that just one therapy doesn't do the whole, it's not a solution for all of us. It's good to have sauna for different reasons at home, but I think it's interesting to test different therapies and also to change therapies from time to time as well, so that we can really stimulate our body and our processes in different ways. And this is where I see a huge opportunity for clinics to work together and also to share data that we can in terms of results, because we can learn from each other a lot. There's a lot of hype and there's a lot of therapies that were very much promoted in the field of longevity, and today I think they're quite questionable, like NAD plus infusions, for example. What do you think about that?
I've spent the last 15 years working on NAD, and today there is no reason for administering NAD intravenously.
So we can supplement and we should supplement, but there's different ways to do that.
Yeah, and unless someone has data that I haven't seen, it just doesn't make any sense to give NAD intravenously until someone really shows evidence, and demonstrate that it's not only safe, because frankly, many of the NAD infusions, from what I've seen, cost, at least in the US, $700. And you can probably get the same effect for $2 using simple supplements.
Yeah. So, and less time.
And less time and less risk. So, that's the key thing about the aging space sometimes. I would say the commercial interests sometimes go ahead of the interest of the patients. And since people don't know, they go, they get an infusion, they feel it's making them feel better. It could be purely a placebo effect. And I think one thing, the way I really look at our field is the first time that a true preventative medicine model is being established. And I think this is where the role of the clinic is to really look at people as they age with a very careful eye of what could be the consequence of what I see now in the future. For example, if you go and get a regular doctor, you get your blood pressure measured, and your blood pressure is 130 or over 90. Most doctors will say that's normal. You don't have to worry about anything. If you are 30 years old, that would be, for me, a very big warning signal. This is normal for a 70-year-old, But at 30 years old, it's likely that it's going to continue increasing. So it means you are at risk for high blood pressure soon. Same thing for your blood sugar. If your blood sugar is, so normal range of blood sugar is 70 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. So if your blood sugar is 95 and you're 70 years old, it's probably a pretty good number. If you're 30, it's not a good number at all. It means, because we know your blood sugar is going to continue increasing throughout life. So it's really a different way to look at health as a process that constantly changes, and a process that you can modify and intervene by lifestyle interventions.
But this is important also, the responsible medicine. I mean, some basic factors like checking your blood pressure, checking your different blood markers as well, and your glucose monitoring. I mean, these are things that you can do regularly to really start the process of, you don't have to really go into gene assessing your epigenetics and gene therapies and so on. You can really start very with basic regular checks. But also you mentioned that it's a start of preventive medicine, but I think also personalized and P4 medicine that was very much kind of growing, and then now it's a little bit forgotten, even the name, but I think now you're working very, very closely with Lee Hood, who was the inventor of P4 medicine.
Yes.
And I think this is coming back as well in the context of longevity.
It's coming back, and it's been reinvented under other names. Peter Attia in his book talks about medicine 3.0. Well, medicine 3.0 is what Lee Hood has been talking about for 20 years, which is P4 medicine. So the different form of medicine that does not wait for people to be sick to treat them, but really starts throughout life to really maximize and the factor of health. And when we talk about health, even there's a lot of discussion. What is health? Health is always relative, because obviously if you have the numbers, if you're 20 years old and you have the numbers of someone who's 70, you're not healthy. And we know you're going to get into trouble. So there's along with this, a whole area of the field that I think is really interesting is the whole idea of these biomarkers. So if we want to optimize health, how do we measure it? And this is what all the biomarkers are doing, is at any given stage, can we draw your blood and determine what are your risk factors and what is your trajectory look like? Based on what I'm seeing today in this patient who is 50 years old, does this look like this person is going to live to 70 or to 90? If all the numbers suggest that it will be 90, I probably would be very careful about what I would recommend. You're probably doing well, but if it looks like you're gonna, it's gonna be 60, then it's a completely other question.
So you are just coming back from ARDD, largest conference in Europe focusing on aging. What are the predictions? What are the new best biomarkers or the therapies to follow in 2025?
Yeah. First, I was at the meeting. It was more than 1,000 people in person and thousands online. So
it's the largest, I think.
It's a reflection of the excitement and the enthusiasm that's happening in the field. The meeting, I like this meeting because it's a mixture of not only the researchers, but also the clinics, the influencers, the investors, the biotech companies. So there's a lot of optimism that the field is really moving. There's also at that meeting also what I call the fringe, which is the immortalists, the people who are talking about we're going to live forever. And where I fall on this one. I don't think there's any evidence right now for certainly not immortality, but even radical life extension today. There's just
so 123 is the maximum today.
Well, yeah, 122, and that was the longest lived humans, and the second longest lived, I think, was 118. So there's a hard barrier at around 115 for most humans. Someone told me recently that the likelihood that you're going to live to higher than 105 is the same as for anybody to become a billionaire. So, and there are billionaires around the world, but there are not so many of them. So that just gives you an idea also where, of not to think, oh my God, we're all.
And is it connected also with your status?
Well, yeah, there's some connection between economic status and how long you live because of education and so on, or where you live.
And the type of food you can afford.
Type of food you can afford, whether you need 3 jobs, whether you have the time to exercise, your stress level. We know in any animal societies, your pecking order, where you are, whether you are an alpha or whether you are, a dominant part of the species, always live longer.
Interesting.
Yes, in every animal species, including in humans. So anyway, to go back to the conference, I think there was a lot of enthusiasm about what's happening. A lot of hard work, frankly. I mean, some of the most exciting data that I heard is from real biotech companies that are testing new drugs. And there's a lot of discussion of how this new industry should go about developing drugs. Should we call aging a disease and have drugs that target aging? I would argue that that's not going to work because the medical world doesn't like this. And we start aging at age 15 to 20. So that would mean everybody is sick, which does not make any sense. A lot of people get really upset when you say that the whole humanity is sick.
How do the companies, the biotech companies, are going to validate whether this is longevity? Are they going to do multi-year studies, or are they going to use biomarkers of aging?
Probably both, but the way many of the companies in the field are developing is they are identifying, so they don't target aging per se. They're not making anti-aging medicine, but they are targeting aging-associated diseases. For example, sarcopenia. If you age, you will lose muscle mass. And some people lose, and we know when you lose a lot of muscle mass, your prognosis is not good in general. So there is, for example, a number of companies are targeting new drugs that block sarcopenia. My prediction is some of these drugs are going to have anti-aging effect against other parts. Another good example, a lot of excitement right now about
GLP-1.
A class of drug called the semaglutides, GLP-1s. So these are drugs that were developed against, again, another example of what I say, you target one disease. So these drugs were developed against type 2 diabetes, but it turns out they seem to be having life prolonging effect. They seem to be protective against neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's. They seem to be protective against heart failure. We see the same thing with another class of anti-diabetic drugs called SGLT2 inhibitors. So these are drugs, again, developed for type 2 diabetes, but now they seem to have a protective effect against heart failure and other variables. So,
but this was the same with metformin, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. A good example. Yeah, so these are all pieces of the same puzzle. And quite often it's interesting that many of these drugs that are today known to have an effect on lifespan and so on, or on a health span, are all targeting glucose metabolism. And we see the same thing in animal models. When the first pathway that was identified as controlling aging was insulin signaling. So I think that's one reason there's so much emphasis in the field on wearing CGMs and being careful, how much sugar you eat, the types of sugar
Exactly. One thing we know, sugar is not good for you.
Yes. Well, but now, we know it's directly linked to aging.
Yeah.
So that's really one important aspect.
But you see, how much more energy you have when you cut sugar. It's very, very difficult. It's very addictive, but it's really, really. I can see it on my quality of my skin, on my results. It's amazing, actually. But and also how much more energy you have.
Yeah.
When you do that. I wanted to come back to a conference that we are organizing at the end of the year together at the Bach Institute for longevity clinics. We started last year. This was the first time that we have invited different clinics focusing on longevity that were known to really follow the medical pathway, let's say, so that they really follow medical best practices, but also introduce different new tests and therapies that are maybe more wellness and not yet fully tested in longevity field. So can you tell me how important do you think this gathering is today and what we are planning to achieve?
I think it's incredibly important because we are, you, the clinic, and our colleagues, other clinics in the world are essentially trying to invent a new form of medicine. And I think at any time you create a new industry, there's a lot of questions. What is the best way to do this? And I think there are now a number of clinics that are popping up around the world, and
quite a number.
Yeah, your clinic here in Poland, I think, was one of the first ones to do this. And now you've built some experience, but there are still. I visited a number of these other clinics, and I can tell you nobody is doing exactly the same thing. So there are multiple ways. Some are more focused on diagnosis, some are more focused on long-term treatment, some make drug recommendations. So there's some are more sort of pushing drugs that are more dangerous. So it's really an exciting time, and I applaud you and your colleagues for working with us, for having this meeting, because it's really our goal for all of us is to improve human health. Yeah. That's really everybody wants to have a successful business, but with our heart, I think we are in this because we want people to be healthy and happy. And so it's a really important time as we develop these clinics to compare notes, to see what works, what doesn't work. I always tell people this is not the time or the place to be competitive, because there are 8 billion people on Earth. There's enough patients for all of us to be successful. So the key is really to talk, to share, and to advance an agenda that at the end will make happen what we hope will happen.
This is so important. I mean, when you are inside of the field, you think that everyone is talking about longevity, but in fact, we really also want to attract the right doctors. We want to train the right doctors. There's also other organizations that are now growing, that are focusing on training doctors and also on getting the right protocols for doctors out there. But for clinics, we really want to agree on certain standards, and what should be the base test that most of the clinics should be doing that could be considered longevity, because there's a lot of clinics that do just normal personalized medicine or preventive medicine, and there's no biomarkers of aging. There's nothing that is connected actually even to any hallmarks of aging. So I think what we are trying to define is what is today a longevity clinic, and what kind of minimum diagnostics or interventions we need to really follow longevity protocols or guidelines, so that we can also create certain common collaborative platforms that we can exchange information and learn from each other as well. Thank you very much, Eric. This has been
my pleasure.
Very, very interesting as always, and I look forward to seeing you next year.
Same here. Thank you.